to the world of culture, gender, sexuality, tradition, business, and so much more. Hi, I'm Regina Gershman.
And I'm Dr. Sam Dubé. Together, we're going to take you on an extraordinary journey with engaging people from around the world, starting from right here in Ottawa, the capital of Canada. Hi, Dr. Sam Dubé here with my colleague, Regina Gershman, dating etiquette coach. We're here today with Dr. Janelle Simmons, originally from Flushing, New York, to talk about intercultural dating. Janelle, call me Sam. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you as well.
Now, we had a wonderful conversation last night where you talked a little bit about the differences in dating Asian men. You actually have a fair amount of experience living in Asian communities, and you do speak Korean as well.
Yes, that's correct.
So, full disclosure, I am an Asian man. My mother is born and raised in the Orient, and I don't want that to stop you, because I definitely have my own ideas, but that's not what we're talking about today. So just full disclosure to our viewing audience. So Janelle, can you contextualize this for us a little bit? Tell us a little bit about your experience in living in Asian communities and what you'd like to talk about today.
Sure. I grew up in Flushing, so if any of you are familiar with Flushing in New York, it's a very multicultural town. There are many various Asian groups populated within that town. And the population is approximately over 200,000 people. So it's, when you say town, you think smaller, but it's actually quite large. And I grew up, most of my best friends or my closest friends were Chinese, Korean, Indian, Nepali, and then I had 2 Hispanic friends on the side hidden. And we all hung out. They all came to my home for birthday parties. If you see pictures when I was young, it's like my brother as a baby, myself, and a whole bunch of Asian faces, and maybe one lone African-American male who's also very Asian-esque. So we're all grew up within this Asian population. I actually didn't date Asians. I wasn't allowed to date. So the preface is I was not allowed to date, period. So that made that very easy. I went to university at the age of 17, and I was in the midst of actually mostly Caucasian people, which was very jarring for me. I was very shocked. And I hung out more so with Arabs and West Africans. When I returned back to New York, I went back to my youth church, which was a Taiwanese Chinese church with a small Korean diaspora, and I actually started dating someone within that church who was the friend of the pastor's wife's parents. It's a very long explanation, but yeah. And they were North Korean and South Korean mixed, both of them, and so I started dating him for about two and a half years. And no one in church actually knew, but the pastor and the pastor's wife knew, and my parents knew because he would come pick me up from my home. And there were a lot of minor issues that arose. It wasn't an issue with us communicating because I had known Korean culture, and I actually went to Korea for the first time to see if I could adapt, thinking he would want to go back to Korea. And so I was hosted by several pastors throughout Korea and on military bases. Really liked Korea a lot, and I went back to do a UN camp. But in the midst of that, the issues was actually more so with his parents. So when he was ready to be very serious and the word of marriage came up, his parents basically asked who I was, and they liked the description of me until he got to, and she's African American. And then the whole thing went kaput. So that relationship ended quite quickly. He was married off, or decided to marry his ex-girlfriend who had cheated on him when she went to study in Japan, who's also South Korean. And I think they have like 2 or 3 kids now. Yeah, so after that...
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry
it's okay.
Yeah.
If he was meant to be my husband, he would have been. He was not meant to be my husband, so he's not. But I did date other Korean men, even up till probably a few years ago. I dated an older Korean man also. And I've always been treated really well by Korean men. Communication was fine. We always got along quite well. We always laughed and joked and did tons of activities, went bowling, went to the mall, watched movies, went to church, etc. So there was never any issue as far as communicating or being able to interact with one another or find common ground, common goals, and common activities to do. But I think part of it is more so cultural pressures from older generation parents or grandparents more so than anything else. But I really felt that, honestly, out of all the men I've ever dated, Asian men treated me the best. They always showered me with gifts. They always drove hours to pick me up, literally, and took me wherever I wanted to go. And they really did honor me in that way. And so I felt very blessed to have had that experience.
Could you give us a few more examples, maybe a humorous one, of some of the differences, the cultural differences that you encountered when dating specifically Korean men? Get a nerve, eh?
I try to be kind here. Okay, so
let's just be honest.
We can be kind and honest, yes. I think there was one time, the first gentleman I spoke of when we went out, he found out that I like jazz music, and he knew that I liked the Blue Note, so he took me to the Blue Note. But the whole way to the Blue Note, it's not really complaining, it was very like a subtle nagging about, you have to be nicer. And I was thinking, I am nice, so I don't understand what you're talking about. And so I realized that part of it was a communication issue, and part of it was what he meant was, you have to be more submissive, more so like an Asian female from my culture would be submissive. And so we got to the jazz club, they seated us, we ordered our drinks, we're watching a set, and then I just said, I remember I got annoyed and I finally said, I can't be a Korean female, like I'm not Korean at all. And he's like, of course you're not Korean. Do you look Korean? And so we started this banter between ourselves, forgetting that we're in a jazz club that's in the village in New York City, mostly with Caucasian people, spattered with African American and Hispanic musicians, and everyone's staring at us. And finally, he's just like, in Korean, he's like, the term is aigo-cham, it's a very more of an annoyance, or oh my gosh. He said, fine, you won. And I said, I'm the woman, I always win. And just everyone start laughing, and he start laughing. And it kind of was squashed for that moment. But I realized, that relationship was when I was in my 20s. So I realize now that I'm older, that he was very passively aggressively trying to tell me, you have to form yourself more to be accepted by my family. Because he knew what I didn't know. But he never discussed the matter with me at all. In fact, we dated over 2 years, and he never told me anything that his parents wouldn't accept me, or that his family would have an issue with an African American female. And so I think sometimes part of the issue, I said there were no communication issues, but it was a non-communication issue, in that he didn't communicate what may happen and what he needed and what the reality may be. And he also wasn't willing to give a little and decide that if I was worth it, he would choose me over all of those things. So that's where the cultural issues arise, because he came from a much more collectivistic community at that time, and he was the oldest son. So being the oldest son, there were higher expectations on him than the other siblings.
Yeah, there was a lot of cultural differences as well, and that he wasn't willing to tell you what his parents thought as well.
Now, being the child of an interracial marriage, I often found it difficult to pull apart or extricate culture from personality. If my mother demonstrated a certain personality characteristic, how much of it was culture, how much of it was her? They're inextricably linked. So what do you think attracted the Korean men to you, given that there were certain cultural constraints from the older generation? were there things that were more culturally ingrained in you that they found attractive? Did they have a fetish for black women in particular, or what do you think? Or is it a package deal? Can you give some insight into that?
I don't know how to answer that. I can tell you that there's the strange situation specific to Korean culture in that Koreans will date people of other races to improve their English. That sounds very funny to other people, but it is very common. So I think initially he already knew the pastor and the pastor's wife very much like me. I was very much part of their family. So he knew he could trust me. And I was already actually, as a favor to the church, I was already helping him with English separate. So actually what started with him improving his English, actually he started to spend more time with me and got to know me. So I think initially he was just thinking, I'm going to learn English from her, and he had no intention of dating me whatsoever. And then after we started spending time with one another, he actually began to like me, and I think it surprised him. And then he just decided, well, will you go out with me? And it was very nonchalant style, and I was like, okay, well, you have to take me somewhere, and you have to treat me really well. And then he's like, okay, what do you like? And so it started like that, and then he would just, everything that I liked, he would acquiesce and find a way to make it happen, which I thought was actually really appealing. So I think it really started with English and then turned into an attraction. I don't think he would have ever dated almost any other African American female specific to him. As far as the other Asian guys, I'm not sure many of them had dated African American females either. They probably dated Caucasian females, is my guess, in the past. But I think a lot of them also were surprised how much I knew about the culture and how comfortable they felt with me. And I think it became more so of, I just like her. They kind of just saw me and decided to date me.
Do you have any stories about cuisine differences, for instance?
There must be a lot of.
I love Korean food and I cook Korean food. As a matter of fact, I made kimchi jjigae the other day, so no.
I'm in Korean fried chicken actually, and found a great place recently. So
and he actually took me for Portuguese food, which I had never eaten before. And I was like, it's just meat. And he's like, just try it. It's so good. They roast every single thing differently. He loves food, by the way. Oh, so we sat there eating pounds and pounds of meat. And I was just like, I'm so full. And he's like, it's so delicious. Let's take a box home. This is how he was.
So that's wonderful. Can you give us any more insight into some differences between African American culture and East Asian and specifically Korean culture?
You know, it's actually...
I don't want to pigeonhole you, though.
No, you're not. It's just something I've thought about a lot. Because in some ways, especially due to the history of South Korea and that, Korea and then split South Korea, but then as Korea as a country itself was a smaller nation surrounded by these massive nations, right? Like Russia on this side, China on this side, and Japan may have not been, Japan's a bit more spread out. So yeah, to some extent. And so they were oppressed and enslaved multiple times. And so I think in some ways, not that in my personal history there was a lot of enslavement, because there wasn't. A lot of my family was from Britain and they weren't slaves, but in some ways there were similarities as far as understanding means of oppression, or understanding standing up for oneself and fighting, and understanding how to be expressive. And in general, amongst all of the Asian groups, Koreans tend to be very passionate. Extremely passionate and extremely expressive once they decide to finally say what they want to say. And so I think specific to Korea, yeah, there are those similarities between part of African American culture. For Japanese, actually, I didn't know so many Japanese that date, whether they're male or female, that date African Americans. And I think a lot of similarities are in the arts, music. And they just feel very comfortable and they're very open. Amongst Chinese, I've seen I've seen, and I told you there are blends in my family of Chinese people with African Americans, etc. I've seen it, but it's more so. I think also it's more opportunity and maybe just being able to be more free. And so I think there are a lot of similarities actually between various Asian groups and African Americans and African American culture. I just think that most African Americans are unaware of it because they don't see that as their struggle, or they don't see that as their interest. And there are some African Americans who've never left their town or their city or even their state. So I don't think that would be something that they would really think about necessarily, unless it was someone they thought was just amazingly hot or something, and they decided to go after them. But I do think in some ways there are more similarities than differences. I think the idea of respecting one's elders, is similar for most, not everyone, but for most. I think there are definitely more similarities than differences.
What were your parents saying about you dating this man?
Oh, my father had dated a Chinese woman years ago, and the only reason why he didn't marry her is because her family was going to disown her.
Oh.
And so he really loved her, and he really thought about it, but he just said, I can't, if something goes wrong between us, now you have no social network, and you have no support system. So he couldn't go through with it, so he didn't marry her. As far as my mom was not excited. Especially when she starts seeing the gifts, and the gifts are very expensive. And she was like, this guy may actually be serious, but he may see you more as something that's exotic. And you have to be careful that you don't lose your heart. And then you realize that it was just an opportunity for him to be with someone different that he finds exciting, rather than someone that he would really marry. And so my mom was concerned, and that was more so of her comment. She didn't say anything negative per se about him. She was very polite to him when he'd come upstairs to pick me up, but that was more of her concern than anything else.
You know, along those lines, let's get to the nitty-gritty here. Among many traditional East Asian families, that once their son or daughter brings someone home to introduce, it's considered serious. And so I know a lot of parents who purposely don't want to meet the people.
That's what I got.
Exactly. Because then they would be acknowledging the seriousness of a relationship that they may or may not approve of. Mm-hmm. So tell us about your experiences with that.
Well, the other Asian guys I dated, like I said, I didn't date them as seriously. So with him, though, his mom had come to the United States. His cousin was getting married in D.C. So his mom flew from Korea to D.C. from a wedding. And it was at that wedding that he told her what was going on. And he had spoken to his dad, too. His dad had been a North Korean soldier. His dad was just like, no. His mom was like, everything was great, like I said, until he said African American. And then she was just like, she'll never fit in, etc., etc. And he's like, but she really does. Like, so she refused to actually meet me. And actually, he didn't have the guts to tell me the whole story. That's why I said there was a messy ending, which is why my church friends were very supportive and didn't ask too many questions. Because I was actually away, and the pastor's wife found out what was going on, that I didn't know the end of the story yet. And she called me, and she took me to my favorite Korean restaurant. And she treated me like my favorite dishes. You have to understand, these particular pastors did not have a lot of money. This was a very expensive restaurant and very expensive dishes. So I already knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what was wrong. And we're almost through the meal, and she was just talking nonchalantly, but you could see she's thinking like how to say what she wants to say to me. And then she said, oh, do you know so-and-so? He's getting married in like 2 weeks. And this is how I found out. So he didn't tell me this part. And I just started crying. I was actually teared up, and I went to the bathroom, wiped my face, came back, and tried to act like I wasn't crying. And then she's like, I know you're crying, just cry. And then I just like bawled. And because he hadn't broken up with me. So see, this is what I'm saying. It was a very messy ending. Because he was passive aggressive. That's what I was saying. He's culturally and personality wise, he was just passive aggressive. And I went home and I contacted him, and we got in a huge argument, and then he was blaming me because I was too wonderful. It's a very bizarre story, actually. And I wound up getting invited to the wedding, To which I thought about it, but then I thought, I don't know his wife, and it's a very complicated situation. Then to meet his parents in that circumstance is just very jarring. And I was invited to speak at a youth conference anyway, so I wound up preaching and teaching at a Chinese Bible conference in Pendle, and he got married that weekend. And he emailed me after. He would send me pictures of his kids. It was just a very strange, because he wanted to be friends still. He still cared about me, but for me, it was a very strange interaction, because since he didn't inform me that he was getting married to this girl, and he didn't tell me anything until the last minute because I confronted him, and he blamed me, but then he would be like, so how are you? Here are pictures of my kids. What are you doing? Do you want to meet? And I was like, no, you're married now. So I'm like, and you married someone who had cheated on you already, so I don't understand why you're contacting me. So it was a very strange interaction. That's when I realized how deeply he had never really processed his own emotions, and he wasn't honest with himself or his family or this girl. And so I'm sure they have a wonderful marriage now, because I stayed way far away from it. And I'm sure their kids are wonderful, but it just goes to show you that he still missed me and missed my friendship, and he didn't know how to extricate the two. And if the ending had been cleaner, we may have still been friends now, but the ending wasn't clean, and I couldn't get involved in that.
Well, it's true, and it's a good thing you didn't get involved with that, because, I mean, it sounded like he really, really loved you in his own way, and his parents were persuading or forcing him to marry someone his own kind, and he just couldn't tell you. And so that's why you were told differently in a restaurant among your favorite dishes, because I think she knew that you would be totally shocked, which is human nature. You'd be human, that you'd be shocked, and not him telling you, but somebody else is telling you that he's getting married. You feel like you're betrayed and hurtful. Again, it's normal feelings, but it's good that you didn't want to meet him, and you didn't as friends even, because it would be very hard. It would be tragic, and you would get hurt at the end anyway.
You know, Janelle, you're obviously highly educated, PhD in education, so well-spoken, charming, funny. I mean, you've got so much going for you. What misperceptions do you think the East Asian or Korean families had of you, that they were maybe perpetuating, that caused them to immediately think of you in the negative when they found out their son was dating you and that he was serious about you?
I lived in Korea for several years, as I told you. And in Korea, especially at that time, around that time, in the media, usually when Koreans saw foreign news and they saw African Americans, they saw probably one of 3 or 4 versions of images. Athletes, musicians, criminals, and some complaint or something about something. They always just saw African Americans as complaining. So they usually saw like these 3 or 4 various images repeatedly. At that time, there were not a lot, outside of the military that was there during the Korean War and after the Korean War. There really were not a lot of African Americans still in Korea when I was there. When I went to seminary, there was one other African American female who was way older than me and was allegedly a deaconess, and she dropped out of the seminary. In a mega church of over 40,000 people, there was maybe a handful or 2 handfuls of African Americans, mostly male. One who spoke French, by the way. Their images were that, and then us, and they just thought we're just the select few that must be sort of decent. And so I think, and then you also had, when you were referring to the blended children that were left, a lot of them had been orphaned as well. So Koreans didn't have a very positive perception of the African American males who were in the military, because they saw them as just using their women, and then the war is over, or their stint is over, and dumping them and their kids and going home. And those women struggled because they were ostracized from their communities very heavily, sometimes from their own families, and they struggled to raise these children. And so I think a lot of Koreans really had poor perception in general of African Americans in general. And then the next slew of people that came weren't mostly African American when I was there. They were West Africans or North Africans working in the factories. And so they're looking down on some of these people coming from various regions. And so their perception was not always necessarily good. I think what happened with me is it was a process of getting to know me, the same as my childhood friends' parents. A lot of their parents were extremely racist when we were growing up. I wouldn't have used the term then, but they were, and they would just invite me to their home, and I would go and hang out with them and their family. And it took years. It literally took years, sometimes over a decade, before their parents accepted me and were like, oh, she's good people. And they got to know my family, and they're like, oh, they're good people. And a lot of them are educated, and a lot of them do have different giftings, and they do what they say they're going to do. And then there was some acceptance, but this took years. So to think that one would just wander into the actual original culture in Korea and just be accepted and have a positive perception about them throughout the community, it's almost impossible.
Janelle, what advice would you give to a woman, African-American woman involved with an East Asian or Korean man, or less specifically, perhaps, anyone involved in an intercultural relationship? Any words of advice?
I think the first word of advice would be make sure that you have open communication. And make sure you discuss where you want the relationship to go. It's different to date someone just to date someone, or to hang out with them, or to have fun. But if you're actually going to have a serious relationship in the future, it's really important for both of you to know what you're looking for, know what you want, and know what you're willing to compromise on. And know that you're willing to stand up to everyone in the world if it's necessary. Because not every family is going to be so accepting. And sometimes even your friendship peer group is not going to be that accepting. You're thinking, this is 2020, this is ridiculous. But even now, there are a lot of people I know who bring people to their friends or their family, and their friends and family are still like, no, it's not possible. This is not going to work. And then know what some of the sacrifices will be. Because even within my family, there are many... I'm actually multiracial, but I just say I'm black, so just go with that. But there are many interracial and biracial people within my family, and their parents, their marriages lasted because they fought for each other. But I'm sure there are a lot of things they didn't tell us, and a lot of relationships that they lost along the way because they chose to be with someone who didn't fit into the script of what their friends or families thought, or who they thought they should be with.
Understood. Regina, do you have that question?
Yeah. No, it's true. It's just similar in Jewish culture as well. It's, the parents get in the way of their friendship and potential love, and the parents will say, no, you're not going to marry this person. You're going to marry a person that we have chosen for you. Mm-hmm. And it's like in other cultures, the parents will actually, even in today's society, 20th century, they will force their children to marry somebody else that they have chosen for them, leaving them heartbroken, and nothing they can do about it but to go with who their parents have chosen, mm-hmm. and not their original love.
And even if it's not strictly culturally mandated now, especially in East Asian traditions and in families that are bound by that, the children often feel the need to please their parents. And even if they're not being, quote unquote, forced, you still feel that urge, because there's that deep respect for the elders that's ingrained in the family, whether or not you were born here. I find, especially in Asian families that I've known, and it's just something we accept. So, Janelle, is there anything else you would like to add to our discussion today?
I think both of you have covered it pretty well. You asked me some very pointed questions. I'm not sure I have anything else to add.
Dr. Janelle Simmons, it has been an honor and a pleasure. You were an absolute delight to have this discussion with. On behalf of Regina Gershman, dating etiquette coach, and myself, Dr. Sam Dubé, hopefully we'll get to speak again. And thank you so much for your time and your insights and your personal stories.
Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you guys and speaking with you, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Dr. Sam Dubé here along with Keith Mackler. Today we're going to be discussing intercultural and intergender dating issues. Keith, thanks for joining us. It's an honor and a pleasure to be discussing this with you today. How are you doing?
Thank you, sir. I'm okay. You know, I'm staying alive. I'm trying to hold on to the creativity, you know, that I enjoy so much, and being an entertainer. This is especially tough a time because we love to be around the people, you know, whether that's in a live setting in front of a crowd or just on a movie set or something. You know, there's hundreds of people around. It's not going to be happening for a while, but, you know, I found ways to stay connected and to, you know, keep the juices flowing. So I'm just cautiously optimistic about the future right now.
So I see lots of posters and memorabilia behind you. Can you tell us what it is you do? How do you entertain?
Yeah, well, I'm actually at a little rural log cabin, but usually I'm in the big city doing film work, TV work, commercials, music videos. You know, this is acting primarily. I'm also a crew member sometimes on things. I'm a writer on some things. And I do a lot of stuff with working with the general public as a brand ambassador or street teams, working events and parties and things like that.
Wonderful. Now, Keith, let's get down to the brass tacks here. You mentioned that you are the longtime boyfriend of a transgendered immigrant. Can you give us a little more detail, please?
Well, yeah, you know, my partner, Francois, is not transgender, but he or she, you can say either, is a non-binary person. And she's also a transvestite, which is, I guess, is kind of an antiquated term. But Francois is someone who is biologically male and was born a male, but who dresses in what would be considered traditionally female clothing and doesn't identify as a woman, but identifies as a genderqueer person. And her, you know, there's a difference between gender identity and then sexual orientation, you know, so she is attracted to males.
So can you elaborate on that difference between gender identity and sexual orientation, and along with the term, what is it to be genderqueer?
Absolutely. I think that's an important distinction because people sometimes think that those are interchangeable terms. Right. And they're actually much different. The identity and gender identity refers to the body that you are born in. Does that reflect how you identify in your mind and how you see yourself? I am a cisgender male, you know, so I was born a male. I feel like I am a male, you know, I don't always, sometimes I don't identify with any gender or any race, including the human race. But that's one thing. And then the other thing here is sexual orientation, which would be who you are attracted to, you know, and that is irregardless of your gender identity. Those two are really independent factors.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about how you and Francois met and your courtship? And any anecdotes you would like to fill us in on?
It was a brief courtship, about 10 minutes. No, so we tell people that we met at the farmer's market. And I was admiring a cucumber, and Fran said, you have good taste. But the truth is, we met on this little app on the phone.
Yeah.
People love each other very much, and they hook up, as it were. So we met on the Grindr platform, which is actually it's kind of like Tinder, but it's geared towards gay men and also people that are just in that rainbow, transgender people and non-binary people, etc. Everybody's on there. It's a big party. So the way that we met is we were actually supposed to go out to the movies, and because I'm so youthful and exuberant, I didn't have an ID on me, and into an R-rated movie, I had to prove that I'm 25, sir.
Oh, really?
That's many years ago. I would never not walk around with an ID now. I always, at all times, am ready to show that. But I said, you know what, this is ridiculous. I was embarrassed. I was going to buy the tickets in advance, have her meet me there, and I'm Joe Cool and everything. But then I couldn't get the tickets, so I said, screw this. I'm going to go home and tie one on. I said, you want to just come hang out? We'll watch a movie here. And Frank goes, okay. So that was our brief courtship. And we met. It was just, man, maybe, hopefully we all have this experience in our lives. You just see somebody and you go, yep, there's like kind of the missing puzzle piece. And it's been a journey for years, and we've gotten to know each other, and, our relationship has evolved. But, I got to thank technology for that.
What is your sexual orientation then? How do you self-identify, Keith?
So I actually identify as pansexual. I used to say bisexual, although I'm predominantly attracted to other men or, male-identifying people. Of course, that is changing, daily. But I used to say bisexual, but I felt that was inadequate because it kind of connotes that there's only two orientations and therefore two genders. So pansexual is more open. It means I could be attracted to a man or a woman or a non-binary person or a transgender person of either gender, or there's some people that don't identify with any gender or are somewhere in the middle. So I don't like to exclude anybody, really. And I found that as my life goes on and I'm exposed to more people and more kinds of people, that I really, people unfortunately limit themselves saying, oh, I'm only attracted to this, or I'm only attracted to this. They define themselves first, then go out into the world and try to make everything, stick to that definition. Whereas I say, hey, just figure it out. Go into the world, find out what you're attracted to. And so that's why I don't rigid classification like that.
Okay. Now, all relationships have ups and downs. But were there any particular challenges that you felt you had due to how you two self-identified and identified as a couple?
Yeah, well, Francois is from the Caribbean, where she grew up. Being gay is not a thing. I mean, you can basically get murdered for walking down the street holding another man's hand. So we're coming from two vastly different cultures. I'm raised in the northeastern United States and in a liberal area, and I never faced really homophobia. I never knew how ugly this was until I was with I've seen depictions of it and everything, but being with someone who is a femme guy walking down the street having insults and epithets hurled at us, that was the challenge to overcome. First of all, just because I'm what they refer to as a straight passing man or something. So I had never really experienced that firsthand. Also, with Fran's family, they're all on their own journey to accept and love her for who she is. And that is not the predominant mode of thought in Caribbean collectivist cultures, let's say. So that was an obstacle, and it's something that, she's continuing to work through. But when they see that she is who she is an independent person, is a successful person, and is respected in her industry and in her city, that gives a lot of credence to the fact that this is a legitimate human being, and we don't need to prove that we're, equal, or prove that we deserve a shot, or whatever these preconceptions people have that you're somehow the other. We're breaking down some of those walls.
So you talked about some of the negative aspects and the epithets and the insults and the hate. Can you remember any overtly positive experience that you had in the outside when you were accompanied with Francois and vice versa? Can you tell us something heartwarming?
Sure. I never realized how accepting the LGBT community can be, and how just joyous and celebratory and affirming it can be. And I wasn't really immersed in gay culture, let's say, that much before I was with Francois, and this goes back years. It's a long and complicated story that will need an entire other hour to get into, but I was not always out. There were certain people I had been out to since high school, since I was a child, some that I kept things under wraps until my mid-20s. I was working in the hip-hop industry and et cetera, and there was a lot of issues there. So being with Fran, it was also an opportunity for me to kind of spread my wings and to just, come out with the fierceness and embrace those parts of myself that I not necessarily suppressed, but that just weren't fully given room to breathe. When we go out to these clubs, we go to Pride, we go to different events in the community, lectures and screenings and concerts and so forth. When I was introduced to this community, I was really astounded by how open and embracing they are. And I love the gay community, and I support them with, actual tangible work, and also just advocacy, and even, doing things like this, which is fantastic. I really appreciate being given a platform to talk about something like this, and it's important that people see it. So thanks.
Absolutely. So what were some of the, at the risk of specifying, okay, I want to hear some joy, I want to hear some laughter, I want to hear what's one of the funniest incidents you've experienced with Francois, and perhaps pertaining to the unique experiences that you have.
Oh man, one of my favorite experiences is when we went down to Florida. And, Florida and the Caribbean are really not that far from each other. So Fran was familiar with some of the native territory, the flora and the fauna, let's say. We went to an alligator, sanctuary or something, Gatorland. And one of my favorite photos that I have ever taken with Fran, and I have this framed on our mantle, is where I'm holding the little baby crocodile, and it's got, the tape around his mouth. It's a stunt. It's an actor, basically, and it's probably sedated. And so I'm holding the alligator, and Fran, I believe, has a snake, wrapped around her neck, and she's smiling, and it's like that fake smile where you're like, get it off me.
Yeah, get it off me.
Like strained look of bewilderment. And, that's, I don't know if that's cross-cultural, but it's just something that, oh man, there are things that endear you to people. There's certain experiences that you can have where you kind of see who somebody is. And I think vacations, especially to an exotic place that you're not used to, can bring out some of that fun. And I'll send you that photo later if you want to put it up.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. That would be great. Yeah. So what were some of the real low points that you feel you could talk about today? What were some of the low points in your relationship, and did it have anything to do with how other people were involved? Can you talk about that?
Yes. Really, a lot of the problems that we had are because of other people, because of my reactions to other people. Now, I was talking about discrimination. A couple of years into our dating, and I was working at this tourist attraction in Times Square in New York City. And, there's all kinds of people that come through there, but there was this one particular gentleman who was not a fan of the homosexuals, and we were dancing at this Halloween party, and he was saying, various words that are not nice words, and I was getting very heated. I went to get violent and fight and crazy and everything, and, to defend the person I loved. And, people were saying, you're going to get fired, don't mess around, etc., and just walk away. And Fran said something to me that was so, kind of life-affirming or earth-shattering or whatever. She goes, I don't have time for them. And I'll translate it. I don't have time for them. This is somebody from a different culture who grew up and developed a really thick skin because of the expectations and societal expectations of where she's from. And this has served her as someone living in New York City where, are safe from getting yelled at. So this is, there's a difference in the way that you develop as a person, the way that you find coping mechanisms, the way that you develop skills to deal with things that are coming at you, that I could really appreciate in someone who has led a much different life than I have. And I think a lot of discrimination is based out of fear, which is rooted in ignorance. And basically, if people knew more people who were gay, knew more people who were transgender, knew, oh, that's Bill, oh, that's my friend, oh, that's the guy at the post office, oh, that's the lady at the grocery store. There wouldn't be so much anger, so much hate. I was never like that to begin with because I was raised to believe that everyone deserves a fair shake and you're not better than anybody else. But a lot of people, I guess, they really do need that exposure. They really need that life experience to show them maybe a better way to live, a better way that they can be and how to treat others with more consideration.
Yes, we all tend to fear the differences, some more than others. Having that time pass between that incident and today, would you have handled it differently, and how? If so.
Right. Yes, I would like to think that today, after many more years of being with Fran and many more years of being immersed in that community and fully realizing who the hell I am, that I would now have the strength and the wherewithal to just go, you know what, you don't like me, go away, or I'm going to go away, or I just say, brush you off, whatever, who cares, no skin off my nose. Whereas then I was so angry. I was how dare you? I was just filled with this rage. And I think that also comes from experience and it comes from time, and the more that you find ways to handle a situation and find ways to create that peace of mind in yourself where you go, hey, I'm cool with who I am. I'm happy in this situation. If you got a problem with it, buzz off. I don't have time for you. I'm not going to let your negativity and your, black cloud hang over me. I'm just going to go over here and do my thing. And I feel much better now, with the knowledge that I would handle the situation better due to experience.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Supposing that that man is watching this video podcast, what would you say to him today?
I'd say,
here's me.
Well, I don't want to strangle the...
Okay, I thought you just said...
No, cool and collected. Cool and collected.
Cool and collected. What would you say if given the opportunity right now, no consequences, what would you say given that opportunity?
In all seriousness, I would just say, hey, get cool with yourself. Be okay with yourself. Figure out how you can be happy and go pursue it. We only get one life. Don't get all caught up and worried about what I'm doing and what I'm doing with my partner. That's our business. You worry about your life. If you feel fulfilled in your life, if you feel happy maybe in your relationship, if you feel happy at your job, if you feel happy with the way that you spend your time and you feel okay about yourself, you're not going to have any problem with me because you're going to be too damn busy enjoying life. And you're going to be at that big Ramones, P-Funk, Grand Funk block party, and you're not going to have time for petty things like hating somebody for the way they dress or the way they look or who they're with. You're just going to be running through life going, I can't wait to get out of bed in the morning. I love life. And God, we could all only hope for that.
Wow. Well, if you could give advice, because you can, Keith, to another couple in your situation with your background, not specific, but in general background, beyond the gender norms, and feeling, hate from different corners, but also feeling love from different communities, what advice would you give such a couple?
I would say what I've learned, the few things I've learned in these many years, when you're in a relationship with someone, give them time and give them space. Don't come with expectations and don't say, well, I'm going to change this aspect about you, or I don't like this about you. I need you to be this way. Recognize the person that's in front of you and appreciate them for all that they are. If they do some annoying pet peeve or whatever, you can, there's ways you can communicate that. But in the long run, and I'm talking about the big ticket items here, your future and your, the soul of your relationship, the reason that you like each other, the reason that you want to hang out with each other for years, you need to give each other room to breathe and room to grow. And I think the ideal relationship is one where people are kind of intertwined and they're each evolving. And the new me is meeting the new you, and then the new you is meeting the new me. And we're on that path together. Rather than, I'm saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, and I'm going, just let me live! That is not the way to go. And I think a truly fulfilling and beneficial relationship to both parties is one where you're kind of gently and organically kind of sussing out the best in each other. And that's what I strive for. I think I'm doing that. You can interview Fran, maybe she'll tell you different, but
maybe we should get her in here.
Yeah.
Where is she right now?
She's actually working out of state right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be reunited very soon, hopefully.
Wonderful.
Situations happening, around the world. So,
given everything that's going on right now, especially in the U.S., and post-COVID protests, BLM movement, what do you feel the future holds for gender diverse and sexual orientation diverse couples such as yourselves beyond the norm? What do you think the future holds?
I would say I just hope that the future holds more awareness. And I think that's what's happening right now. Sometimes people literally have to take to the streets and scream and yell and protest to make other people pay attention and go, okay, these are legitimate concerns. These are people who need a voice, who have been silenced. And I feel like things can only get better from here. You have to be, well, as I say, you have to be confronted with reality sometimes. And that can be uncomfortable. And for people that have built a wall around themselves about, this is who I am, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, there's more in the world besides you. And it's more about finding out how you can be a steward of the earth and a steward of society and figure out where you fit in and how you can, facilitate that for others rather than just being about me. And I think right now this is a huge wake-up call, what is happening, that a lot of people are, frankly, very selfish. And hopefully, by being exposed to some different people, some different viewpoints, some different lifestyles, they would be motivated to reevaluate certain aspects of their thinking. And that's really the best case scenario as we move forward.
Understood. Can you recall the funniest situation in dealing with, and it's not intrinsically funny, obviously, but because of the outcome, it ended up being very funny, dealing with prejudice?
Wow. How come that was funny?
Like maybe turned on the prejudging people in some way.
Yeah, well, it's always funny when people find out that people they admire are gay, and I think this is why it's important for celebrities to come out. It's not that it necessarily is a funny outcome, but it's an unexpected outcome, and it's an outcome, when people admire a certain athlete or a singer or a celebrity or an actor, and then they come out as gay, and then they use their platform, hopefully, to signal boost some kind of progressive message. Those are real moments of change where people can go, oh, wait, so-and-so is gay, but I love that guy. At that point, they either have to go, I'm throwing out every record he ever did, I'm throwing out all the DVDs of this guy, or they got to go, oh, geez, if this person is gay that I dig so much, maybe the problem isn't with him, it's with me. And that kind of ties into what we were saying earlier. So I think it's those unexpected moments, those little surprises. And I'll leave you with this. I'm so sorry. Unfortunately, I got to hop on another call. But I hope that these moments continue. And I think that conversations like this are exactly what people need to be engaged in and exactly what people need to see.
Keith, thank you so much for your time. It's been a wonderful experience discussing this with you. Maybe we'll get to chat again in the future, and I wish you and Francois all the best. I'm Dr. Sam Dubé. Keith, once again, thank you so much. All the best in the entertainment industry as well, and stay safe. Take care.
Thank you, Sam. Cheers.
I know. This is awesome. Oh.